Power isn't always taken by force. Sometimes it dissolves without a sound, lost in a glance, a hesitation, or a careless phrase. And long before psychology gave names to behaviors, Machiavelli already understood the silent betrayals we commit against ourselves. Because real power doesn't crack under attack. It leaks, and slowly, invisibly, through emotions we think are harmless. Every day most people broadcast their weaknesses, not through words of surrender, but through subtle signals they didn't mean to send. If someone wants to control you, they don't need leverage. They just need to know what moves you. And the moment they see what triggers you, you're already beneath them. That's why if you want a mind that can't be read, bent, or broken, you must erase 3 emotions from your visible self. Most people display them daily, and they don't even know they're bleeding power. The first emotion Machiavelli would order you to erase is the need to please, and here's the trap. It rarely looks like weakness. It disguises itself as kindness, charm, social grace. It's the smile that appears just a bit too soon, the compliment that sounds generous but lacks authenticity, the eagerness in your voice when you say yes before a question is even finished. To the outside world, it looks like you're just being agreeable. But beneath the surface, something much deeper is happening, a subtle, almost involuntary surrender. Because the need to please is not a decision, it's a compulsion, a quiet internal whisper that says, if I soften myself just enough, maybe I'll be accepted. So you adapt, you shapeshift, you silence your own instincts just to be seen as pleasant. And with every soft nod, every overly quick response, every laugh that doesn't match the joke, you're not just participating in conversation, you're training the world how to treat you. You think you're being respectful. What you're really doing is handing over the script to your value, and Machiavelli would call that a strategic collapse. Because in any power dynamic, the one who appears to need something, especially validation, immediately falls below the one who withholds it. This isn't about arrogance, it's about control. The person who leans in too soon, smiles too often, agrees too quickly, they're broadcasting a very clear message without even realizing it. You have something I want. Please give it to me. And what happens next? The other person gains leverage, not because they've earned it, but because you've gifted it. They begin to subconsciously believe they are above you, not because they are stronger, smarter, or more capable, but because you told them they are in your tone, your timing, your posture. And this imbalance becomes the new foundation of the relationship. This is why the need to please is so dangerous. It masquerades as likability, but it functions as silent self-erasure. It becomes habitual. You enter conversations not with curiosity, but with calculation. What should I say to be accepted here? And in doing so, you lose the very essence of your influence. You become a reflection of what others want you to be, instead of a force that shapes how others feel around you. That's not connection. That's performance. And performance always comes at a cost: exhaustion, misalignment, and most of all, invisibility. Because when you're constantly bending to be liked, people stop seeing you. They only see the version of you they've trained you to become. So how do you kill this? You don't become rude. You don't swing to arrogance or cold dismissal. Machiavelli wasn't interested in emotional extremes. He was obsessed with strategy, and strategy means restraint. To neutralize the need to please, you must first master the pause. You speak slower, not because you're unsure, but because you're not performing. You stop filling silence with nervous chatter. You let others sit in the space between words. Let them wonder what you're thinking. You respond with calm, not with urgency. You nod once, not 3 times. You smile when it's real, not when it's expected. And this recalibrates the dynamic entirely. Because the less you need from others, the more they start to need from you. That's the paradox of social gravity. People aren't drawn to desperation. They're drawn to mystery. And nothing is more magnetic than someone who doesn't rush to prove themselves. When you walk into a room without the silent plea of, "Please like me," people can feel it. They sense that your value isn't up for negotiation, that your approval must be earned, not given freely in hopes of acceptance. And when they sense that, they begin to lean in. They adjust their tone. They choose their words more carefully, not because you demanded respect, but because you didn't ask for approval. That distinction changes everything. You don't have to stop being kind. You just stop trading kindness for approval. You don't have to stop connecting. You just stop offering emotional discounts. Machiavelli would remind you, true power doesn't need applause. It moves quietly, with the confidence of someone who no longer leaks signals. When you pause, others fill the silence. When you listen, others try to impress. When you don't flinch, others start recalculating. And in that recalculation, power transfers. You go from being the one chasing presence to being the presence everyone adjusts for. The second emotion Machiavelli would strike from your face, your tone, and your posture is conflicted admiration. It's harder to notice because it looks like respect. It sounds like praise. It wears the mask of support. But beneath that polished exterior is something much more volatile: comparison. This emotion reveals itself not in what you say, but in how you say it. You congratulate someone, but your jaw tightens. You agree with their success, but your body leans back, creating distance. You align with them publicly, but secretly resent that they're in a place you believe you should be. Conflicted admiration is a fracture, a split between the self you present and the envy you suppress. And the moment someone sees that fracture, they stop trusting you. You become not a supporter, but a silent challenger, a competitor dressed as a fan. This emotion is dangerous because it exposes your inner war. People can feel it. They can hear it in the compliments that sound rehearsed. They notice the way your eyes shift when someone else is celebrated. They pick up on the subtle interruptions, the tone mismatches, the praise that somehow always returns to a comparison with your own path. And when that happens, you become transparent. Not in a way that builds connection, but in a way that leaks insecurity. The people you admire begin to pull back, not because you've said something cruel, but because they can't reconcile your words with your energy. And energy, that silent communicator, never lies. Even the most casual observer starts to detect it. They think, there's something off about this person, something doesn't align. And that tiny sliver of doubt is all it takes for your influence to weaken, because power, once questioned, is already leaking. Machiavelli wouldn't tolerate this in his court, not because admiration is weakness, but because conflicted admiration is chaos. It's indecision made visible. He would say, if you admire, admire completely. If you cannot, then remain silent. But never praise with one eye open and the other eye jealous, because when you do, you give away your coordinates. You announce where you feel small, you reveal what you crave, and in doing so, you offer others the exact blueprint of where to apply pressure. That's how empires fall, not by external attack but by internal contradiction. When a man's eyes say, I envy you, and his mouth says, I respect you, he becomes readable. And when you're readable, you're vulnerable. And when you're vulnerable, you become a target. So how do you kill this emotion? First, you interrogate your comparisons. Who are you watching online that makes you feel not inspired but bitter? Whose success do you pretend to applaud while quietly minimizing it in your mind? Who do you shadow, not out of admiration, but to measure your own worth against theirs? These are emotional parasites. They drain your attention, they distort your posture, they twist your intentions. Machiavelli would advise this: either study in silence or praise without envy, but never blend the two, because this middle ground, this emotional limbo, it reveals your weakness to everyone around you. To rebuild your presence, you must remove the performance. You stop pretending. You either truly respect someone, and your energy shows it with peace, or you remove yourself entirely from the frame. There's no shame in not admiring, but there is weakness in faking admiration while holding tension inside. That's what people sense. That's what exposes you. Real tacticians don't need to tear others down to feel worthy. They build their own structure, brick by brick, silently. And when they study those above them, they do it without bitterness, without need. They know that admiration, when untainted, is strength, but admiration poisoned by comparison is a leak, a crack in the armor. Here's the truth. Conflicted admiration is never just about the other person. It's about you. It's about your inability to sit peacefully in your own lane, to grow at your own pace, to evolve without measurement. So the solution is internal. You must decouple your identity from the need to catch up. From the idea that someone else's achievement is a threat to your timeline, because until you do, every interaction you have, especially with those ahead of you, will be distorted, and that distortion will be felt. Machiavelli knew, a ruler who envies his advisors is a ruler already dethroned in his own mind. The same applies to you. If your respect comes with tension, it's not respect. It's submission wrapped in resentment. But once you remove that emotion, once your praise becomes clean or your silence becomes strategic, you become clear again, solid, untouchable. People no longer try to decode your energy. They feel safe around it, or at least they feel cautious, and caution is a form of respect. That's the standard. You don't admire to be liked. You admire to learn, and if you cannot admire without cracking, then you observe from a distance and you build without noise. That's what Machiavelli would demand. Not the appearance of grace, but the discipline to contain what leaks through the cracks of your ambition. The third emotion, and perhaps the most fatal, is anticipatory doubt. It doesn't roar like fear. It doesn't glare like envy. It whispers. It creeps in before a single challenge is made, before a word is spoken, before anyone opposes you. You oppose yourself. Anticipatory doubt is the quiet collapse that happens in your posture, your tone, your energy. It's not the reaction to a threat. It's the expectation of failure. And Machiavelli would tell you, this is the emotion that separates rulers from the ruled. Because when a man begins to question himself before the world has even spoken, he has already surrendered the high ground. He has already submitted to a defeat that hasn't occurred. And in that moment, that single, subtle moment, everyone watching takes notice. It shows up in the most ordinary ways. You hesitate before answering a question. You add a disclaimer to your ideas. I'm not sure if this will work, but you raise your hand halfway. You present a plan, but your tone bends downward at the end of your sentence, as if asking for permission. None of this sounds like collapse, but to a predator, to anyone watching with the intent to measure, it screams. They don't hear your content, they hear your hesitation, they see the shadow of uncertainty in your eyes, and they interpret it correctly. This person doubts their own authority. That alone is enough to shift the room, because confidence isn't about being right, it's about never flinching. The moment you flinch, you give others a reason to test you, and someone always will. Anticipatory doubt is especially dangerous because it feels responsible. It feels humble. You think you're protecting yourself by softening the delivery of your thoughts. But you're not protecting, you're weakening. You're broadcasting a message that Machiavelli would have called suicidal. I don't believe fully in what I'm about to say. Challenge me if you want. And trust this, the world will. It doesn't have to be a hostile world. Even allies will begin to speak over you, interrupt you, reinterpret your words. Not because they're against you, but because you trained them to doubt your presence. Your uncertainty invites intervention. It creates a vacuum, and power does not tolerate empty space. Someone will always fill it. If you don't, they will. So how do you kill this leak? You begin by retraining your reflex to explain. When you feel that urge to defend your idea before it's even questioned, you pause. You let the silence sit. When you're not sure if what you're saying will land, you deliver it anyway, without softness. You let others react. You stop predicting rejection before it arrives. Because every time you hedge your thoughts, you dilute them. Every time you buffer your ideas with insecurity, you hand over the authority that should have framed them. Machiavelli understood this as psychological warfare, not against others, but against your own mind. He would have said, control begins the moment you act like your ideas belong in the room, not after they're approved. You don't need to be arrogant. You don't need to be aggressive. You need to project stillness, certainty, even when you feel none. That's not dishonesty, it's leadership, because leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about holding the frame, especially when it wobbles. When someone challenges you, you don't jump to explain. You don't rush to fix their perception. You let the silence stretch. You let them sit with their own discomfort, not yours. This is how presence is established, not with volume, but with gravity. And gravity can't exist in someone who is already bending under the weight of their own internal doubt. Here's the deeper truth. Anticipatory doubt isn't just about communication, it's about identity. You doubt because you still view yourself as someone who needs permission, someone who must apologize for their intensity, for their ambition, for their voice. That mindset is your leash. It's the invisible chain that keeps you from rising, because even when you gain power, you'll give it away the moment someone stares at you too hard. And Machiavelli would never allow that. He knew, a man cannot hold command outwardly until he has conquered doubt inwardly. So the work is not out there, it's inside. You have to shut the door on the version of yourself that needs to soften every thought, round every edge, prepare every excuse before the world even responds. That version is loyal to the past, to survival. But if you want to lead, not just others but yourself, that version must die. You speak when you choose. You pause when it serves you. You don't explain unless there's a reason. You don't lower your eyes to seem less intense. You don't smile to soften your presence. You don't dilute your authority just to be liked. Because presence, true presence, is not about pleasing or performing. It's about command, and command begins with the absence of leakage. You'll still feel doubt. That's human. But you will no longer leak doubt. That's the distinction. You may tremble on the inside, but externally, your tone stays grounded. Your words stay clear. Your pauses become strategy, not stutter. And the longer you hold that posture, the more people begin to treat you as someone who cannot be shaken. Not because they understand you, but because they no longer know how to predict you. And that's the beginning of something terrifying. Not for you, but for everyone watching. When these three emotional leaks are sealed, the need to please, the conflicted admiration, and the anticipatory doubt, something radical begins to shift. You stop being seen as just another person in the room. You start being felt, not for what you say, but for what you no longer reveal. Your silence becomes sharper than most people's arguments. Your stillness starts to dominate the energy around you. People begin to talk more carefully when you're present. They don't interrupt. They don't over-explain. They watch your face for clues, and when they find none, they recalibrate. Why? Because unpredictability is power. When no one knows what affects you, they have to guess, and guessing is exhausting. That's the dynamic reversal Machiavelli mastered, to never be the one chasing control, but the one around whom control reorganizes itself. Not by force, not by fear, but by unreadability. This is the beginning of the impenetrable mind, a presence that absorbs pressure without cracking, a posture that cannot be manipulated, not because it resists emotion, but because it refuses to leak it. You're not a robot. You still feel deeply, but you've learned to weaponize that depth by choosing what gets revealed and when. Every nod, every pause, every silence becomes intentional. Someone flatters you. You acknowledge without submission. Someone challenges you. You remain still, letting them overexpose their insecurity. You never rush to fill the space. That space is yours. And the more others try to decode you, the more uncertain they become. That uncertainty breeds hesitation, and hesitation is control. But this transformation isn't free. There's a cost. When you stop leaking emotions, some people will feel disconnected. They'll say you've changed, that you're distant, cold, arrogant. Let them. Because the truth is, many people don't want to understand you. They want access to your emotions. Not to help you, but to consume you. And when they can't feed off your reactions, they panic. That's the test. You'll lose the ones who only valued you for how emotionally available you were, the ones who needed your transparency to feel powerful. But in their place, something else arrives: respect. Real respect. The kind that doesn't ask for explanations. The kind that doesn't need emotional proof to recognize presence. Machiavelli never said to be empty. He said to be precise. And precision means your emotions no longer control your behavior. They serve it. That's the difference between reaction and command. Now you no longer explain your ambition. You don't defend your intensity. You don't shrink to make others comfortable. You observe more, speak less. And when you do speak, it's intentional, not to be liked, but to be heard. You don't compete for space. You create space. You don't prove your worth, or you let your restraint become the evidence. And when people finally realize they can't provoke you, can't read you, can't shift you, they submit, not out of fear, but out of confusion. Because power built through silence and presence is ungraspable, it creates a question in their minds. What else is he not showing? And that question is your shield. That's the game. That's how you stop being a player in someone else's frame and become the one who builds the room, sets the tone, and decides the terms. The impenetrable mind doesn't shout, it doesn't beg, it doesn't flinch, it stands, it watches, it chooses. So here's the final truth, the one most never learn. Power isn't about being louder, faster, or more aggressive. It's about removing the blueprint, because those three emotions, eagerness, conflicted admiration, and anticipatory doubt, they don't just express feeling, they expose strategy. They tell the world exactly where to push. But when you erase those signals, you become unreadable. And when you're unreadable, you're unshakable. People stop challenging you not because you dominate them, but because they no longer know how. They can't predict your moves. They can't frame your value. They don't know if you're impressed, threatened, curious, or completely indifferent. And in that fog, they submit to the one thing they can sense, your presence. That's the true mark of strategy. The game doesn't bend to noise. It bends to the quietest one in the room. The one who plays 3 moves ahead. The one who never leaks, never explains, never blinks. And that's exactly who you're becoming. Every time you resist the urge to react, every time you choose silence over desperation, every time you let them talk and say nothing, you're no longer just part of the world. You're reshaping how the world moves around you. This is the Cold Strategist. And if this message hits something deep inside you, it's because you're not here to play nice. You're here to rise, subscribe, stay silent, and let them guess what you're building next.